The night my hidden camera caught everything, I realized this wasn't about trash anymore, it was about control. What started as a simple annoyance turned into the kind of neighborhood story people whisper about for years. And the moment I pressed play on that footage, everything changed. It began quietly. Every Tuesday morning, I'd walk outside expecting to find my trash can where I left it, neatly beside my driveway. But instead, it would be tipped over, garbage scattered across the sidewalk like someone had kicked it on purpose. At first, I blamed raccoons, then the wind, then maybe careless drivers. I cleaned it up, shrugged, and moved on. But it kept happening. Always the same way. Always my trash can. Never anyone else's. After the third week, I started paying attention. I checked the weather. No strong winds. I looked for animal tracks. Nothing. My neighbor's bin stood untouched while mine looked like it had been targeted. That's when the suspicion started creeping in. Someone was doing this deliberately. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual and watched through my window. The street was calm. Kids waiting for school buses, joggers passing by, everything normal. Then I noticed her, the wall woman everyone politely called strict. She walked down the sidewalk with perfect posture, clipboard in hand, scanning houses like an inspector. She paused briefly near my driveway, then kept walking. I didn't think much of it until later, when I stepped outside and found my trash can knocked over again. My stomach tightened. Coincidence? Maybe. But my instincts said otherwise. I asked a neighbor if they had seen anything. They hesitated before saying, "You know she doesn't like your can being visible, right?" That was news to me. No warning letters, no messages, just silent judgment. Suddenly it made sense. The timing, the pattern, the randomness that wasn't random at all. Still, accusing someone without proof felt risky. War drama could spiral fast, and I didn't want a neighborhood feud. So I did the reasonable thing. I moved my trash can further in, hoping the problem would stop. It didn't. The very next week, it happened again, only worse. The lid cracked, garbage scattered across my lawn, and something inside me finally snapped. This wasn't an accident. It was targeted, deliberate, and childish. That night, while cleaning up yet another mess under the streetlights, I made a decision. If someone wanted to play games, I was done guessing. I wasn't going to argue, complain, or confront anyone blindly. I was going to let the truth speak for itself. So I went online, ordered a small hidden camera, and waited. I had no idea that what it would capture would shock not just me, but the entire neighborhood. The package arrived 2 days later, small and ordinary, the kind of box no one would look at twice. But to me, it felt like the beginning of something bigger. Inside was a tiny hidden camera. Simple, discreet, and exactly what I needed. I wasn't trying to start a war with the HOA. I just wanted the truth. That evening, I waited until sunset before installing it. I chose a spot that gave a perfect view of my driveway and the trash can without being obvious. From the street, it looked like part of the house. No flashing lights, no obvious lens, just quiet observation. I tested the angle twice, adjusted it once more, and finally stepped back, feeling strangely nervous. Part of me wondered if I was going too far. Maybe I was just frustrated and imagining things. Maybe the trash can was being knocked over by something innocent. But every time I thought that, I remembered the pattern, the consistency, the way it happened only to me. My gut told me I wasn't wrong. The first night felt long. I checked the live feed more times than I wanted to admit, watching an empty driveway like it was a suspense movie. Nothing happened. The next morning, my trash can was untouched. Same thing the next day. I almost felt silly for worrying. But then Friday came. I woke up early, stepped outside, and froze. The trash can was tipped over again. Trash scattered everywhere. My stomach dropped. But this time, I wasn't angry. I was curious. I went straight inside and opened the footage. The timeline showed hours of quiet darkness. Cars passing occasionally. A cat darting across the street. Then, just after midnight, movement appeared near my driveway. The camera captured someone walking by, but the figure passed without stopping. False alarm. I kept watching. Minutes felt like hours as the footage rolled forward. Still nothing. Eventually I closed the laptop, disappointed. Maybe the camera angle was wrong. Maybe whoever was doing this knew how to avoid it. That same afternoon, I noticed something else. The wall woman walked by again, slower this time, her eyes briefly scanning my yard. It made me uneasy. She gave a tight smile when she saw me, the kind that didn't reach the eyes. That night, I adjusted the camera slightly, widening the angle just enough to catch more of the sidewalk. I told myself this was the last try. If nothing showed up, I'd drop the whole thing and move on. But deep down, I felt something coming. The next morning, my trash can looked normal. So did the next day. And the next. Days passed quietly. I almost forgot about the situation, until the following Tuesday, when I woke to the loud sound of plastic crashing outside my window. I ran to the door. The trash can was down again, and this time, I knew the camera had seen everything. I didn't even bother cleaning up the trash this time. My hands were shaking as I walked back inside, closed the door, and opened the camera footage. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, proof that I wasn't imagining things. I fast-forwarded through hours of silence, empty streets, passing headlights, nothing unusual. Then, just after midnight, movement appeared on the screen. A shadow entered the frame slowly. The person paused near my driveway, looking around carefully. My heart started pounding. The street was empty, quiet, and still. Then the figure stepped closer to my trash can. Even before the camera gave me a clear angle, I knew who it was. The posture, the confident walk, the deliberate way she moved. It was her, the Wa Karen. I leaned closer to the screen, almost holding my breath. She glanced left, then right, checking if anyone was watching. And then, without hesitation, she shoved my trash can hard. It crashed onto the pavement. The lid flew off. Trash spilled everywhere. She took a second to look at the mess, and calmly walked away like nothing happened. I replayed it again, and again. Every time, the same thing. Intentional, deliberate, undeniable. My frustration turned into disbelief. Why? What did she gain from this? If she had a problem, why not just talk to me? I paused the frame right where her face turned slightly toward the camera. Clear enough to recognize. Clear enough that no one could deny it. For a few minutes, I just sat there staring at the screen. I finally had proof, but proof changed everything. Before this, it was just suspicion. Now it was real, and real meant decisions. Should I confront her, send the footage straight to the WA board, call the police, post it online? Each option felt heavy, like pulling a thread that could unravel the whole neighborhood. I saved the video in 3 different places, just in case. Then I went outside to clean up the mess, but this time it felt different. Every piece of trash I picked up made me calmer. I wasn't guessing anymore. A neighbor walking by noticed me and asked what happened. I hesitated, then said, I finally caught it on camera. Their eyes widened instantly. Word traveled fast after that. I could feel it, the quiet energy of a neighborhood sensing something big was about to happen. Later that afternoon, I saw her walking again, same confident stride. She smiled politely as she passed my house, as if nothing had happened. I smiled back, but inside I felt something shift. She didn't know I had seen everything. That night, I watched the clip one more time. Something else caught my attention. Right before pushing the can, she looked toward my house, almost daring someone to challenge her. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about a trash can anymore. This was about someone who believed they could get away with anything. The question now wasn't who did it. The question was, what happens when the neighborhood sees the truth? I barely slept that night. The footage kept replaying in my head. The look around, the shove, the calm walk away like nothing had happened. Every time I thought about it, I felt the same mix of anger and disbelief. But by morning, that anger turned into something else, caution. I knew one wrong move could turn this into a full-blown neighborhood war. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the video paused on the clearest frame. My finger hovered over the send button more than once. I could email the WA board right now. I could expose everything instantly. But something told me to slow down. If I acted emotionally, the story could easily flip against me. I needed to be smart. Instead, I decided to gather more information first. I started talking casually with neighbors, Nothing dramatic, just small conversations. Almost everyone reacted the same way when I mentioned the trash can problem. Awkward smiles, hesitant answers, and quiet, "Yeah, she can be strict." One neighbor even admitted they'd had issues with her before but didn't want conflict. That told me a lot. People were tired, but no one wanted to be the one to speak up. That afternoon, I watched the footage again, this time paying attention to details. The time stamp, the angle, the clarity, there was no room for doubt. She had done it on purpose. I saved a shorter clip, easier to share if needed, and renamed the file something simple, evidence. Just seeing that word made my stomach tighten. I thought about confronting her directly. Maybe a calm conversation could solve everything. But then I pictured her denying it, twisting the story, or accusing me of spying. Without witnesses, it could turn ugly fast. No, the proof needed to speak before I said anything. So I made a plan. Instead of going straight to the wall, I printed a still image from the video, just enough to show what happened, but not enough to cause immediate chaos. Then I waited. That evening, she walked by again. Same confident pace, same polite wave. I noticed something almost smug in her expression, like she believed she had complete control over the neighborhood. For a moment, I wondered if she did this kind of thing often, small actions that pushed people until they gave in. The next morning, I slid the printed photo into an envelope and addressed it to the HOA board. No angry message, no accusations, just a simple note. This keeps happening. Please review. Calm, professional, hard to argue with. Dropping the envelope into the mailbox felt heavier than I expected. There was no turning back now. For the rest of the day, I felt a strange calm. Whatever happened next wasn't in my hands anymore. The truth was moving forward on its own. But that evening, as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something unusual. She was standing across the street, staring at my house longer than usual, like she sensed something had changed. And in that moment, I realized the real confrontation hadn't even started yet. 3 days passed after I mailed the envelope, and nothing happened. No calls, no emails, no warnings. Life on the street seemed normal again. The trash can stayed upright. The sidewalks were quiet. Part of me wondered if the HOA board had even looked at the footage. Another part worried they might ignore it completely. Then, on Friday afternoon, a white envelope appeared in my mailbox, stamped with the HOA logo. My heart skipped. I stood there for a moment just staring at it before taking it inside. The paper felt heavier than it should have. I opened it slowly. The letter was short and formal. It stated that the board had received my submission and would be reviewing the matter. Nothing dramatic, no conclusions, but one sentence caught my attention. Both parties may be contacted for further clarification. Both parties. That meant they knew exactly who was involved. I set the letter down and exhaled slowly. This was real now. The footage wasn't just something on my laptop anymore, it was part of an official process. Later that evening, the neighborhood felt different. People lingered outside longer than usual, quiet conversations floating through the air. I noticed glances in my direction, then quick lookaways. News traveled fast in neighborhoods like this, and I had a feeling the HOA had already started asking questions. As the sun set, I saw her. The HOA Karen walked down the sidewalk with her usual confident posture, but tonight, something was off. Her smile was tighter, her movements quicker. When she passed my driveway, she didn't look at me. That alone told me enough. The next morning, I woke to a knock at my door. A neighbor stood there, holding their coffee mug like they'd rushed over. "Did you really send the video?" they asked quietly. I nodded. They glanced over their shoulder before leaning in. "Good," they whispered. "You're not the only one she's done this to." That sentence hit hard. Suddenly my situation felt bigger than one trash can. It was a pattern. People just hadn't wanted to deal with the drama. Around noon, another letter arrived, this time slipped directly under my door. No envelope, no signature, just a note that read, "Some things are better left alone." I stared at it, unsure whether to laugh or feel uneasy. Was it a warning, a threat, or just someone trying to scare me into backing down? Either way, it made one thing clear: someone didn't want this going further. I saved the note immediately, adding it to the growing folder of evidence. That night, I checked my camera feed out of habit. The street was quiet, but just before midnight, a shadow paused near my trash can again. My chest tightened. The figure didn't touch anything, just stood there for a few seconds, looking toward my house. Then it walked away. I replayed the clip, zooming in. The face wasn't clear enough this time. But I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't over. Because now, it wasn't just about what the camera caught. It was about who was getting nervous, and what they might do next. The official email arrived on Monday morning. Subject line: HOA Board Review Meeting, attendance requested. My stomach tightened the moment I read it. The board wanted both of us present to discuss the incident and review the footage. Just seeing the words made everything feel real in a way it hadn't before. This wasn't a private problem anymore, it was about to become public. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community clubhouse. 3 days. That gave me plenty of time to think, maybe too much time. I spent those days replaying different scenarios in my head. Would she deny it, claim the footage was misleading, accuse me of harassment for recording? I reminded myself over and over. The camera was on my property, focused on my driveway, and the evidence was clear. Still, the thought of standing in front of the board, and the neighbors, made me uneasy. I prepared carefully. I copied the video to a USB drive, printed screenshots with timestamps, organized everything in a small folder, neat and professional. If this turned into a debate, I wanted facts to speak louder than emotion. Meanwhile, the neighborhood felt tense. People smiled politely but watched a little longer. Conversations stopped when I walked by. It was obvious something was coming, and everyone knew it. The HOA Karen avoided me completely now. She crossed the street when our paths almost met. For someone who used to walk with confidence, she suddenly seemed cautious. Thursday evening arrived faster than I expected. The clubhouse parking lot was fuller than usual. My heartbeat picked up as I walked inside. Folding chairs filled the room. Board members sat at a long table in front. And in the second row, there she was, arms crossed, staring straight ahead. The meeting started with routine topics, dragging out the tension. Landscaping issues, parking complaints, rules reminders. I barely heard any of it. Then the board president cleared his throat and announced the next item: residential conduct complaint regarding property interference. The room went quiet. They invited me to speak first. I kept my voice calm, explaining the repeated trash can incidents and my decision to install a camera for proof. No accusations, no anger, just facts. Then I handed over the USB drive. The board connected it to a screen, and suddenly the footage filled the room. You could hear the shift immediately: whispers, small gasps, chairs creaking as people leaned forward. The video played clearly. The glance around, the shove, the trash spilling. Silence followed when it ended. I didn't look at her, but I could feel the tension radiating from her side of the room. When it was her turn, she stood up slowly. Her voice started confident, saying she was just adjusting the bin, and that things looked worse on camera. But even she seemed unsure as she spoke. The footage left little room for interpretation. The board members exchanged looks. One of them asked a simple question that changed the atmosphere completely. "Why were you touching someone else's property at midnight?" She hesitated, and in that pause, I knew the power had shifted. But what happened next, the reaction from the room, was something none of us expected. The silence after the board member's question felt heavy enough to stop time. Everyone in the room waited. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I was just moving it," she said, forcing a small laugh, as if the footage could be explained away by confidence alone. But no one laughed with her. The video had already done the talking. The board president leaned forward, calm but firm. "Moving it where?" Another pause. People shifted in their seats. A few neighbors exchanged looks. I could feel the mood changing. Not dramatic, just subtle, like the room had quietly decided what it believed. She glanced around, maybe searching for support, but most faces were neutral or cautious. Then something unexpected happened. A hand went up in the audience. One of my neighbors stood and cleared his throat. "I've seen similar things happen," he said carefully. "Not just with that trash can." Another person nodded. Then someone else spoke up, mentioning a complaint about garden decorations that had mysteriously been moved. A third neighbor described their recycling bins being relocated without permission. None of it was explosive, but together it created a clear pattern, a picture of someone pushing boundaries because no one wanted confrontation. The board members listened closely, taking notes. The Karen's posture changed slowly. Her shoulders tightened. The confidence she walked in with faded piece by piece. She tried again. "I'm only trying to maintain standards in the neighborhood," she said, sounding defensive now. "Some people don't follow the rules." The board president replied gently but directly. "Enforcing rules isn't the responsibility of individual residents. That's the board's role." That sentence landed harder than anything else said all night. The room stayed quiet, but the tension eased slightly, like people were relieved someone had finally said it out loud. I realized this meeting wasn't just about me anymore. It was about boundaries and respect. The board asked a few final questions, reviewing the footage one more time. Each replay made the facts feel clearer. There was no argument left. Finally, the president thanked everyone and said the board would make a decision before the end of the meeting. While they stepped aside to discuss, the room buzzed with whispers. Some neighbors glanced at me and gave small nods. I felt lighter, but also strangely calm. I hadn't come here to win, just to be heard. When the board returned, the room went silent again. The president announced that the complaint against me was dismissed entirely. Then he added that residents were reminded not to interfere with other people's property, and that further incidents could lead to official consequences. It wasn't a dramatic punishment, but it was clear. Respect boundaries. I glanced across the room. She stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact. As people began standing up, I thought it was finally over. But just as I reached the door, a board member called my name quietly. "Can you stay a moment?" they asked. The tone in their voice told me this conversation wasn't routine, and whatever they wanted to say next might change everything again. I waited near the back of the room while neighbors slowly filtered out, their quiet conversations fading into the hallway. The energy felt different now, lighter, relieved, but I couldn't ignore the curiosity building inside me. Why did the board want to talk to me privately? The board member who called me over waited until the room was nearly empty before speaking. Their voice was calm, almost reassuring. "First," they said, "you handled this better than most people would have." I nodded politely, unsure what to say. I hadn't felt brave, just tired of dealing with the situation. They sighed and glanced toward the door, making sure no one was listening. "What you brought tonight helped us see something we've been hearing about for a while." That caught my attention immediately. They explained that there had been quiet complaints over the past year. Small incidents, misunderstandings, neighbors feeling pressured, but nothing concrete enough to act on. Without evidence, it always turned into one person's word against another. The camera footage changed that. I stood there absorbing what they were saying. I hadn't realized how many people had been uncomfortable but stayed silent to avoid conflict. The board member continued, explaining that the HOA planned to send a community-wide reminder about respect and property boundaries. Not as punishment, but as a reset. Then they said something that surprised me even more. "We may also be reviewing how resident volunteers handle neighborhood concerns," they added carefully. I understood exactly who they meant without them saying her name. When I stepped outside, the night air felt cool and quiet. Most cars had already left. I spotted her standing near the edge of the parking lot, talking to someone in hushed tones. For a moment, our eyes met. There was no anger this time, just exhaustion. She looked away first. I walked to my car feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The trash can drama that started as something petty had exposed a bigger problem, and somehow it was finally being addressed. The next morning, something unusual happened. My trash can stood perfectly upright, cleaner than usual, even. Someone had wiped off the dirt marks from previous weeks. I looked around, half expecting to see someone watching, but the street was calm. Later that day, an official HOA email went out to all residents, reminding everyone to respect private property and avoid direct interference with neighbors' belongings. The tone was neutral, but the message was clear. Neighbors started smiling more again. Small conversations returned. The tension that had lingered on the street slowly faded away. It felt like the neighborhood could finally breathe. I thought that would be the end of it, and mostly, it was. But that evening, while taking out the trash, I noticed something sitting neatly beside my bin. A small handwritten note. I picked it up, unfolding it carefully under the porch light. The message was short, only one sentence, but it made me pause. And suddenly, I realized the final chapter of this story hadn't been written yet. I stood there under the porch light, holding the small folded note in my hand. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after everything has finally settled. For a moment I just stared at it, wondering who left it and why. The paper felt simple, ordinary, but after everything that had happened, nothing felt ordinary anymore. I opened it slowly. The handwriting was neat but slightly rushed. The message was short. I didn't realize it went this far. I'm sorry. No name, no explanation, just those words. I read it twice, then a third time, trying to decide how I felt. Part of me expected anger or stubbornness to continue. Another part felt relieved. Whether the note came from her or someone close to her, it meant something had shifted. The fight was over. I looked down at my trash can standing upright beside the driveway. Clean, undisturbed. It suddenly seemed ridiculous that something so small had caused so much tension. Yet it wasn't really about a trash can, was it? It was about respect, boundaries, and what happens when people assume they can control others. Over the next few days, the neighborhood felt different. People waved again. Conversations returned to normal topics: weather, work, weekend plans. The tension that had once hovered in the air was gone. Even the wale emails became quieter, focused on routine updates instead of warnings. I saw her once more about a week later. She was walking down the street, slower than usual. When she noticed me, she gave a small nod. Not friendly, not cold, just neutral. I nodded back. No words were needed. Sometimes closure doesn't come with big speeches or dramatic apologies. Sometimes it's just silence and moving on. As time passed, I realized something else. The hidden camera was still there, quietly watching. But I stopped checking it every day. Eventually, I forgot about it altogether. The sense of needing proof, needing to defend myself, faded. One evening, I stood outside watching the sun set over the street. Kids rode bikes, neighbors laughed across driveways, and my trash can sat exactly where it was supposed to be. Peace felt simple again. Looking back, I understood the real lesson. The trap I set wasn't about catching someone, it was about letting truth speak without shouting. I didn't need to argue or fight. I just needed patience, proof, and the courage to stand up calmly when it mattered. The whole situation could have exploded into endless drama, but in the end, it became something quieter. A reminder that small actions matter, and respect goes both
As
ways.
I turned back toward my house, I realized this strange little story had changed more than just one neighbor's behavior. I had shifted the tone of the whole street, and now every time I roll out my trash can, I smile a little because sometimes the smallest victories are the ones that teach the biggest lesson. Welcome to Karen Universe, where we dive into every wild, quirky, and intriguing story out there. If you enjoyed the, don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments.